I'm Lorne Epstein, and you're listening to the Lorne Epstein Show here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. Today we're broadcasting from Unleash here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I've got some very special guests. We're going to talk about recruiting and kind of how that applies to you as somebody maybe looking for a job and other things. With me today, I have a return, actually now thrice.
Two today, second one today.
Thrice guest, yeah. Bill Boorman. Bill Boorman is a recovering recruiter.
I'm nearly a host.
Yeah.
I'm nearly a host.
We have to give like prizes after a certain number of shows. He is a recovering recruiter, having spent 35 years plus in the industry. He fills his time as the Managing Director of Innovation and Technology at Recruiting Daily, and he runs the #TRU events. He also advises talent technology startups. He's worked with Oracle, BBC, Hard Rock Cafe, and other companies on using technology in the workplace. He never wears a suit and always wears a hat. And today, I noted earlier, he has a fedora. A lovely fedora.
Correct.
Burgundy and black.
Burgundy fedora, that's the one.
And also with me I have today, one of my favorite technology professionals is Rebecca Carr. Rebecca is, as a veteran recruiter and HR product leader, Rebecca leads product and design at SmartRecruiters, which is one of my favorite pieces of software. Her organization is responsible for product management, product design, documentation, proposal management, and consulting. Rebecca moved into this role over 2 years ago, growing and managing the account management, customer support, professional services, and organizations within the company. Prior to joining, she spent 2 years at JobVite leading enterprise renewals. Rebecca, welcome to the show.
Great to be here.
Yeah. So we were talking just before the show started about GDPR. And
yes.
I think I'd like to talk about that in a bit. But first, I want to talk about how things are now different for candidates in terms of recruiting. So there's been a movement going on for a few years about how do we make it better for people to apply to jobs. And that's happened, right? I mean, some places you go,
no.
And it's no. Yeah, Bill's already no.
I was going to refute the same point. Well, I wasn't going to say no, it's harder for people, or it's easier for people to apply to jobs, or harder, but more that I don't think that the best talent is actually applying for jobs anymore. It's become a much more conversational sourcing process. And the fact that now the industry is catching up with an improved candidate experience and, faster conversion, it's a little late in my opinion, but that's, I'd rather spend my time focused on sourcing technologies or technologies that are going to help me discover people, and then I can engage them, because just like we all...
I think candidate experience has become a myth.
Talent what?
Experience.
Has become a myth.
That's a good word.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's talk about one thing at a time.
Yeah.
Let's first talk about what's actually going on right now in the marketplace, for the most part, with people who are applying for jobs. What happens?
So active candidates.
Yeah, people who are they're posting their resume to jobs. A lot of jobs are like black holes.
Yeah.
Right? What's happening generally speaking? Can we give some characterization to that?
I would say generally companies are becoming more cognizant of how poor their application process is for candidates. It's slow, it's tedious, it's clunky, and they're making best efforts to reduce the amount of information they collect up front, and maybe are collecting that at a later point in time. And as a result, what you're seeing is a lot of technologies like SmartRecruiters implementing very, very fast candidate experience, or a very fast candidate conversion and application process. Now, the problem with this, and I see it all the time with our customers, is, okay, now I have a really great upfront candidate experience, but I don't have the capacity to start thinking about how should I then manage all of these now huge pool of candidates that has very easily added them to my system, and then give them an ongoing candidate experience that matches that of the good candidate experience they had up front. You've got people, conversion rates jumping up 10, 20% when customers come on board with technologies like SmartRecruiters.
And when you say conversion rates, you mean people applying to people
and then actually getting in that wouldn't have applied, because it's easier. But then recruiters sit there and they sit and new for 90, 100 days. They never get a response. It's a major it's almost made the problem worse, which is then a big challenge for us. How do we
But aren't there, with
this?
SmartRecruiters, just as an example, and there's other ATSs similar, is that if I apply, it may be easy that one click, but then I'll get some questions, I'll get some kind of automated responses based on those questions. It might make it easier for the recruiter to go through.
No, not necessarily.
Yeah, it really.
So it's still just another black hole.
So let me tell you, my opinion at the moment is there are some good technology plays. SmartRecruiters is one of them who's tried to address this front end of the problem. But I think what we've done is, in many ways, made the candidate experience worse.
Say more.
Through technology. And the reason we've done that is either increasing volumes, right, is one thing, and we've done this at the background at the same time of other initiatives, not just technology, like employer branding and messaging, and more and more technologies get pushed to me as someone who buys technologies and saying, this will generate you more candidates, this will generate you more people, this will get more people in your funnel. My challenge then is, can I build a bigger funnel rather than a better funnel? So there's a whole lot of stuff around there. And what we've actually done with this, and I had this with a project with a bank that I was working with in Europe, and I actually told them that by improving their website and improving their apply process, they made their candidate experience worse. Because what they've done is everything we were talking about before, really, which is if you improve the front end, it's kind of like having a hotel and spending $1 million on the lobby and nothing on the bedroom. Because if my experience at the front end is good, because I've gone to an intelligent platform, I've been able to connect really easily, it's been pretty seamless, I've done this on my mobile device, my expectation is the rest of the process is going to match that. So you're raising the bar in my expectation that it's going to be better. So when I'm getting the same process over judgment days or not enough time or not getting feedback, I'm actually more disappointed than less disappointed. So I actually think in many ways we've pushed candidate experience backwards. I think the candidate experience movement have followed the headlines and not the problem as a whole. Although I love the guys, I love their intentions, I love what everyone's doing. I think we followed the headlines. So I think we've misunderstood the difference between candidate experience and applicant experience, which is fundamentally different. So generally we've concentrated on applicant experience. How can we help you to apply easier to connect with a job? And some people have done that, still a minority. As long as I've been going to recruiting conferences, and that's a long time, we've been talking about candidate experience as being an issue, being a problem. We've been talking about it. But the number of people I've seen who've actually genuinely made that better is reasonably limited. I think we've had technology that can help us in that.
So what can help?
Well, I was going to say, I agree that it's generally limited, but I don't think I think that that's tied to the fact that the buyer persona of an HR group or TA team, the idea of them switching platforms from a legacy platform that has not decided to address this is more intimidating than trying to just add on a lot of stuff to that candidate front-end experience through other,
add more steps, rather than take them out.
Yeah, and so it's the real problem is that they need to replace that underlying technology, which when you have long contracts and you have very deep configurations and a ton of process built around it, that becomes a more intimidating and scary problem than trying to address candidate
I had to write a paper for RollPoint, which was a case study of a project we did for Intuit. And the conclusion of this paper, when I got to the end of it, was we went to this from a problem of mobile apply. And we're going back 3 or 4 years, so it was that kind of timing where we're going, Intuit as a business, they build a lot of apps, they want people to better apply mobile, they want to be able to have a mobile experience, and that was cool. Pretty quickly when we got into the investigation, the diagnostic of it, which was fixed, we pretty quickly went, this isn't a mobile issue, this is an apply issue. This is a problem with the apply process, not the... Now, we're making that problem more complex because we're now asking you to do it through a mobile device and we're adding more things to it. Actually, what we've got to do is have a look at the whole apply process. So I think you have to have this holistic approach to the problem, which says it is part technology and you need to go and buy the right solutions to do the right job. But as much as it's technology, it's process, methodology, and also your underlying thought about whether you're driven around. So the places where candidate experience has improved, in my experience, is where organisations have been able to make a direct link to profitability. So if you're someone like a mobile phone or a retail organisation who can say, okay, we accept if 20% of the million people who apply to us a year are customers, and they can walk with their dollars. They can cancel their mobile phones and that kind of thing. We need to spend some money on this. And they've got quite serious about that. You've seen that with, Virgin Media, all kinds of organisations where the customer is portable. There's been a general acceptance of the candidate as customer. So that's a business reason where we've gone, right, there's a reason for investing in that. Outside of that, I haven't seen too many organisations saying, we need to make this whole thing better because actually we need to make it better. Because this is how we want to be.
I'm really curious now because this is getting a little under the covers of like, you can get the one button apply. How can we make it a better experience? Rebecca, in your sense?
Not to be somewhat controversial, but it kind of goes back to my first point, which is, in my opinion, I think there will always be a place for apply, but the reality is that the application process will disintegrate, in my opinion, as sourcing and discovery technologies get so strong and smart that candidates don't necessarily go to a website anymore and need to go through this.
Okay.
This
So you're thinking, wait, hang on a second. So you're saying, the assertion is that in the future, whatever that is that instead of me applying for jobs anymore, companies find me. It's much easier for them to find me, much easier for them to engage me than me to engage them.
And your information will be readily available to them in other places than on a CV.
Than what you gave us. So I was speaking about something about 5 years ago, which people were kind of going, I get the concept, but I don't quite believe it yet. And I had this theory that every organisation would have what I call a talent tipping point. So every organisation will reach a point where we actually know all the people we need to know. So our challenge then is not, and I'm talking to companies I go out and see regularly who have 1-2 million resumes.
Yeah.
Right? Where they're going, and I'm going, you've got 2 million people. Now you don't know what these people are doing because your challenge is a different one, which is how do we keep this information up to date? And there's some clever stuff.
Yep.
SmartRecruiters and others are doing that says your resume is the starting point, not the end point. Historically, that was the end point. You submitted it, we measured it against the job. We probably rejected it, and that was the end. The ATS is where you went to die, really, in reality. So what's happened is that process that we created that brought in enough people created a mentality that said we want to make recruiting Game of Thrones. So getting a job is about the last person alive at the end of the process, not the best candidate.
Right.
And that's what we've done. We've made it, because of the volume, we've sometimes brought in arbitrary measures like saying, they've got to have a degree. And if I go, right, what's the logic that says somebody has to have a degree? They'll go, well, because we have 400 people, we need to make that 400 200. So if we say degree, may or may not have any relevance to the job, but it makes it easier.
So I could say
it has not.
Are they left-handed? We'll make them left-handed.
So one of the
whatever it is.
The things that I have at my organization is that I have a finite pool of people that will work for government services because we provide people for the government. It doesn't go up and down very much. And if I had all those people and I could reach out to those people and I can build relationships with all these people, a lot of my staffing challenges would go away.
Well, this builds a new challenge.
This
builds a new challenge. So what the challenge becomes
if I had that bulk,
is how you view candidates, which is why I'm 100% behind this point around the apply process. I really love your thinking on it. Is the challenge then is how do I keep a relationship with you forever?
Right.
When most of the time you're not looking for a job. So I accept people are changing jobs much quicker. How do I provide you with enough value in that? And that might be learning and development, that might be content, that might be 1,000,001 other things which are not directly hiring related. That means you will stay in contact with me for the next 5 years, 10 years, 15 years.
And in theory, the skill set that one would need in order to do that really well is not necessarily that of the skill set that historically recruiters have had. I obviously I believe in the phrase, I guess, recruiting is marketing, but I think it's a little overused, and that a lot of great technologies are out there that help TA teams and to nurture a talent pool that facilitate this activity. But having now built 2 CRMs, it's all shiny and pretty, and then when it comes time to actually having to do it...
They use it the old way. They just use it the way they always did.
the old way that they're comfortable with. And unless the technology makes that easier, which obviously we're trying to do over and over again, it's still not a behavior that's ingrained in the minds of those people that are so used to getting a CV and screening it and providing a review and moving to the next one. And
rinse and repeat.
Yeah. The concept of actually really passively sourcing and nurturing a pool of people is one that needs and requires a lot of guidance. And so we get a lot
I
of
also
questions
think it's
about
a
it.
massive challenge for the technology companies, right? Because some, and I'm far from all, let's say 20% of technology companies that I know what they need to build for the future, but that's not necessarily what their customers are going to buy, right? So at the same time, I always say, when people are complaining about technology, if I come to an HR tech conference and people are sitting around saying, oh, our ATS or our CRM or whatever it is that they're generally complaining about of the moment, and they'll have a few names they'll chuck in that, and different people will have different views. When we do that, I always say to them, we deserve that, because this is the technology that we demand, and this is the technology that we buy. And if we would only buy something else, that would be the technology that vendors have to build. So I don't see it as being, and a lot of the vendors, when I talk to the right people in those vendors, they know what the problems are.
Yeah.
And they know what would solve that. But their biggest challenge is adoption. So I'll go and see people about their ATS or their CRM or whatever it is. Big one I had over the last 18 months was people saying to me, we need a new ATS. And I'd go and look at the ATS and say, yeah, you don't need a new ATS at all. You need CRM. You want to do
what's
marketing.
the difference? To the folks who are listening, what's the difference?
Do you want to give a technical
Sure.
answer?
So ATS, applicant tracking system, is really about the tracking of a formal applicant from a new status, so like an external application coming in, all the way to offer. So it usually is associated with a position. There's usually a hiring process, an interview panel. They are actually an applicant on a real position.
Most of it's rejection.
And a lot of it is rejection. A CRM is more of a community or pool-based product that sits on top of an ATS usually, that doesn't have position association. Usually it's skill-based, or internship would be a good example of one. There really isn't necessarily a home for these people, but they're being nurtured over time, maybe because they're not ready, or because there isn't a position that's fitting for them.
Increasingly, we're looking at that being internal mobility, so that might have your existing employees in there at the same time, which is another development in TA that TA would handle, talent acquisition would handle internal mobility, what's traditionally been an HR management role. It might be your boomerang community, ex-employees, it might be your contractors, your vendor management system.
You know,
So
often
it's all
people
these
leave a
people.
company for another company and not realizing that job they wanted was right someplace else.
No,
another division, another
what's
place.
fundamentally changed is why people leave, right? And most organisations I talk to still think like people join a company and they stay until they get a clock at the end and they say thanks for coming. And that's how they try to attract people, and that's how they try and select people and how they try and manage it. And the reality in the marketplace, for many reasons, which suits both the employee and the employer, I would argue both sides benefit from this arrangement, is average length of service 2 to 3 years. Slightly different depending where you
Country,
go,
region.
country, but generally lengths of service are changing, shrinking. And the studies that I'm doing with organisations that I work with is people, when you used to leave a job and you might only have had 3 or 4 jobs in your career, 5 jobs in your career, when you left it was because there was a dramatic occurrence. Somebody was upset with somebody, so you probably would never come back, because leaving that job and getting a new job was a big deal. So part of technology, accessibility of jobs, I think people's lack of belief in companies anymore giving me a job for life has impacted that as well, where people said, right, I'm not going to go and work where my dad worked and work there forever, because those industries don't exist. So now people are looking at jobs in terms of, I'm going to take this job because it's going to make my next job much easier to get, because I'm going to get 3 years experience in this place and that will do good. So people are changing jobs for different reasons. They're moving around a lot more. But equally, because there's not a dramatic reason for them leaving, it's just that there was another job, or there wasn't an opportunity, or they wanted to go and do something different, the rehiring of people is becoming a much greater source, and also your ex-employees are becoming your greatest source for things like referrals, because they have no axe to grind. So if I don't work for you, but I'm saying, I worked there and that was really cool for me for that period of time, then I'm going to be your best referrer, because that's even better than a referral from an employee saying this is a good place to work.
And this would be stuff that our CRM would hold.
Yes.
Yes, it's all relationship management. So I view it as, so what happens is lots of people were looking at complaining about their ATS because it didn't do and the CRM function is doing things like running your career site, running landing pages, having recruitment marketing, probably referrals in there somewhere. There's all kinds of things.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, though, I think that the reason why, I think when people come to us and they say, I want to change an ATS, I hate it. Oftentimes, when I look at that ATS, the problem is actually not the technology or the lack of missing technology necessarily, but I think that's a good point that you make. It's the adoption, and it's the fact that their process has become so complex because they have just layered and layered and layered and layered that they can't figure out how to fix it. So that they actually think it's easier to just rip it all out and start all over fresh, which is sometimes the case, but it's the direct result of people just sort of following behind, I think, all of these trends.
Disillusionment has reached such a point that you're just like, we just need to get rid of it because everyone hates it and it's never going to work.
Yeah, and the second that your hiring managers just say, I'm not going to use it, puts up not only legal and compliance concerns, but also is that of, how are you going to be able to report or understand any insight about your organization or be able to report on any of these metrics that everybody's talking about, like the quality of hire metric, without that data all stored in one place.
And that hiring manager is a real big one as well. So historically, an ATS, for me, I compare it to an ATS. Good ATS is a really project management based. There's a series of tasks that have to be completed in an order that gets somebody hired. And you build it like a project management software. Like, what's the task, who owns it, what's the timetable on it, and what's the next task? Mm-hmm. So what would happen? And that's really how I look at that. CRM is completely different because that's relationship based. So what's normally happening when people are buying a CRM is they're then bolting that onto an ATS when you're saying, actually, where does your process start? Perhaps you should start with the job. But if the job is written in the ATS, you're kind of right in that in the middle. So there's so many different process things. What I've found, and I find this fascinating, some of the work that I do, is I've never been in an organisation where people know how people are hired. I've never been to one. And that's some really big management consultants, banks. They will tell you the headlines, like there's 3 interviews, a video interview, a psychometric test. When you go, okay, how does that happen? So I'm finding things like going into a graduate hiring organisation, 59 tasks that have to happen to get someone hired. Mm-hmm. Now that might be, you've got to send an email to someone to book a meeting room, or it takes 10 emails, unless you've got a diary management system, it takes 10 emails to organise a meeting, the actual meeting, to say, go to the candidate, say you're successful, they email you back and say, yeah, I'm free on these dates. You go to the hiring manager who says, no, I'm not free on these dates. You go back to the candidate and say, so you might have all these things going on, right? And you only need one of those things or one of those people to not do their job or be off sick or have something happen or not put the record into the system, which is more the case. And your whole process falls down. Not only does it fall down, but where it falls down is invisible. So what we're looking for much more from technology is visibility of where we have an issue, and do I actually need a person to do that? Diary management, scheduling, all of these tasks that we're seeing more and more of that intelligent stuff. And I'm also beginning to say more and more, I want all this stuff, but I don't want 10 providers. Because I don't want to have to go and post my job somewhere and then go in another system and do something different, which is where we're looking much more for. The big drive in the last period of time, and please tell me if I'm wrong, because you've been in the market, same as me, having these battles, is everyone went through a period of going from ATS, they said, we want a CRM. They began to buy that. So for a period of time, if you were a point solution like referrals or a recruitment marketing platform, you had to somehow become a CRM. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, people didn't have budget, or they'd go, yeah, we want referrals, but we want it as part of some other things. It's almost like the RFP tick the list. Yeah. So you have to do all of these functions, including the career site, the landing pages, the recruitment marketing, the referrals, some kind of intelligent profiling of candidates, building databases. And then the apply bit was post-apply to you have to get the steps done. Whereas now, what the trend is saying, we actually want that CRM and that ATS to be, we want pre-apply and apply in one place. And we will want to integrate some best of breed stuff, but we want that to operate within your platform, because recruiter experience, which people are talking about a bit more, hiring manager experience says, I just want one screen, never mind one technology. I just want one place to go. I don't need...
There's more balls to drop, the more the technologies you have to use. And frankly, with those 59 tasks, how would you have time to actually leverage any one of those technologies well? Which is exactly why CRM fails for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah.
They get stuck in the 10 emails to schedule an interview instead of focusing on how they actually build relationships with people to fill their pipeline, and therefore they use application as a crutch when it doesn't necessarily need to be, if the right prioritization was given to some of these activities, or technology was able to automate some of these more manual tasks, which is what companies like us are trying to do, or you see these point solutions trying to do.
Or make it candidate driven, where if you've got the diary management system, then, and the next step is arrange an interview, that should be an automatic function, because it is in e-commerce.
Yeah.
It's the simple, when we talk about frictionless technology or whatever, just says the next thing that has to happen. My belief is right now we can automate about 80% of our workflow in hiring. And so the conversations that I get in, which bring this to the next level, is if you have 100 recruiters, and this is a real conversation I've had with an organisation recently, if you've got 100 recruiters and I can automate 80% of that work, do we fire 80 of those recruiters and have 20 people to get the same outcome, albeit we might reduce our cost per hire and our time to hire because we're getting some automation efficiency, but all we're really doing is increasing our scale and speed to do certain things by automating them and making it a bit more seamless, hopefully, candidate experience? Or do we use this opportunity to make things better and say, if we kept those 100 recruiters and we gave them 80% of their time back, what would they be and what difference would that make? So I think we're in this place where the technology, if we allow it and we allow the smart people at places like SmartRecruiters to develop the technology that we need and have some trust in that, we have the opportunity to make some significant changes in the current day and age. But I have to see the appetite.
So one of the things I've noticed in a lot of places I've worked at is that there's the workflow generally is very light on candidates talking to recruiters talking to candidates, and very heavy on the administration. And maybe it's 70-30 or 60-40, but there's this tremendous amount of work that recruiters have to do, writing offers, setting up. And at the end of the year...
But that's lunacy that they have to do any of that.
But at the end of the year, I still have a whole bunch of positions unfilled. So I think, to answer that question, is that I would have my recruiters talking to more people, and we would hire more people and meet the goal.
It's also a quality problem. So you aren't filling those roles because the wrong people are sitting in your pipeline, and that's a discoverability problem. Right. If you're leaning on the application process for a crutch, you have a lot of people coming in, you're not screening them effectively, they might not be qualified, you're just doing all those tasks with no possible outcome because you're not pre-vetting up front. And CRM is one way to do that. So we've been talking about passive sourcing and relationship management, but there's other technologies out there like programmatic advertising and direct marketing with AI and machine learning and understanding these profiles that can actually show your job only to people that are relevant.
At the right time, in the right place,
in the right place. Venue. They then come through your application process or they express interest. And that 70% of administration is actually, and hopefully it reduces with more and more technology enhancement, like self-scheduling and all these other things, but even if it stays at 70%, it's not wasted time on people that will never make it to the offer or higher stage.
Or may never want to.
Or, yeah.
The more information you give them, they may never want to.
Have you heard about the Target baby postcard? So Target, the Target company, sent out these postcards to women who were about to have a baby. And on one side of it, it had a picture of a woman who was pregnant with a Target logo on the baby bump. And this guy, his daughter, his 15-year-old daughter, got the postcard. And he was incensed because he's like, my daughter's not pregnant. So he called up the local Target,
I know the story.
not knowing, and he said, what's going on? My daughter's not pregnant. The guy's like, I just work here. So what had happened was that Target had created a key. They looked at all the women who purchased stuff and then found the ones who got pregnant and realized there were these 3 or 4 things they bought. One was like a blue bath mat, a large bag, and something else. Things that you wouldn't know. But because of big data, they could figure it out. And in fact, she was pregnant. So the woman who shared this story with me is a data scientist at the University of Maryland. And she built an app. She has a big fat Twitter pipe where within like an 80% confidence rating, she can tell whether a woman is going to have postpartum depression, which is tremendous because if you know that, you can treat it and it's much better for the women and the baby. So I asked her, I said, well, in my career as a recruiter, I've had this experience where I've called people on the right day. It was just like, oh, you called me at the right time, where they had a bad day. And I said, can we do that? And she's like, absolutely. So I said, how? She says, well, all we got to do is call up 1,000 people, candidates, and ask them a couple of questions, get their Twitter handle, make sure they've given permission, and I can take that data and build you a key that will work so that you can do that.
And then you use that, that's what we'd call flight risk. So all those, that's really what Cambridge Analytica did with politics. That's what I'm talking about in my session tomorrow at Unleash, is about how data is used to predict certain things, right? And
let's come back. We're going to take a quick break. Hi, I'm Lorne Epstein, and you're listening to The Lorne Epstein Show, where we talk about jobs, careers, and the workplace, here on 96.7 FM. If you're interested in being on the show, you can give me a call at 240-876-0276 or email me at Lorne, Lorne, at electriccow.com. You can check out our Facebook page, which is Lorne Epstein, and also our Mixcloud account. So if you go to mixcloud.com, Lorne Epstein, you'll find our shows. Thanks so much. Welcome back. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein. You're listening to The Lorne Epstein Show on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia, with Rebecca Carr and Bill Boorman. We're talking about all sorts of things recruiting, and you're about to talk about
the Cambridge Analytica stuff, right? So the targeting of the right people with the right message at the right time was a pure profiling of people. Using 3 sets of profiles. So I was using a questionnaire which was developed at Cambridge University by Dr. Kovac. I saw that questionnaire 7 years ago as a recruitment product, which is what it was built for, to profile people. It was distributed through MTurk, which is an Amazon company, and also Qualtrics, which is an HR data company. They distributed that questionnaire and ultimately got 250,000 people to complete that questionnaire. Used that data with a permission in the questionnaire to take the Facebook profiles of all your friends and all the public available data, and they made that 70 million profiles. And then it was transferred to a company in Canada who built Ripon, which was a marketing platform and websites with landing pages that would track behaviors. And they then took all of that data and triangulated it with people who they knew were Republican voters. So where they knew the intent, and they could say, we have the data on 70,000 people from their intent, their reason, their profile that says this group of people are interested in this thing, this group of people are interested.
70,000 or 70 million?
70 million.
70 million.
Yeah.
So they could then match it against, if they took 70,000 Republicans who they knew their intention, that's the data set that says, okay, from a data point of view, what does a Republican look like? Or what does a Democrat look like? And if we can now map that, we may know you're a Republican when you don't. We may know your voting intention. So all of the stuff we're talking about here is not a new science. We can get into the ethics and the morals and all that kind of stuff. But I think sometimes the things we talk about feels like tomorrow's world, at the very specific target. And we enjoy the convenience of that. If you deliver the right product to me at the right time, when I need it, at the right price, I enjoy the fact that I don't have to search for lots of hotels, booking.com tell me the right one, based on my past behavior, my past preference. I enjoy the fact that Netflix don't tell me to look for films, they just say, yeah, what's this one? You'll love this. And they're usually right. So I love that, the data and recommendation. So there's so much of that science that we can apply to what we do to making it better if we start using our imagination. Now, we've also got to make it sure it's making it better, because in many respects the potential is that it can make it worse. And our experience of people is, if you give people the opportunity to do something stupid, they usually take maximum advantage of that to do stuff. So we have to think about how we're doing this, which is where the technologists come in to help us make the right choices.
And it's a very hard problem to solve, too.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information out there, and if you think about it, a platform like SmartRecruiters, roughly 1.5 million people apply through SmartRecruiters a day to different jobs from different places in the world with varying levels of either strong or weak data sets. We're going and trying to have them enrich it so that we can continue to learn and learn and learn. But there's a lot of other technologies that recruiters use on top of their existing. When you mentioned Cambridge Analytica, I was actually thinking about how when Radian 6 was first came out,
exactly.
It was like the listening for Twitter words that a bunch of, I remember thinking, whoa, this is very advanced. I think of it now like, oh, that kind of listening for keywords informs my data set.
Yeah.
Why couldn't I incorporate those types of technologies in? And some companies got ahead of that and started using that to target
I
people.
did a project on Radian 6. You bring up Radian 6 for recruiting entirely.
Yeah.
And I could identify candidate and candidate intent. This is like 7 years ago, something like that.
It was a long time ago, and it was.
But it was sentiment. It was sentiment.
It was, but that is, no vendor at the time really jumped on how can I learn from that outside of the very niche, like innovative technologists that the geeks that really wanted to think about creative ways to recruit for people. But see, if a company had gotten on that, let's say even 3 or 4 years ago, right now is the time where I feel like, especially with AI and machine learning being a big piece of the conversation.
And just the volume of data.
It could be very achievable.
Think about the way we look at things. So the example I use when I'm talking to people is, we can look at a resume as one of two things, right? We can look on it as a means of applying for a job, which is a straight measure. Now, you might use data to do that, or you might use human eye where we do, but really what you're saying is, here is a job, here's a person. If these two things roughly match up, we'll create an interview or whatever the next step is. Or we can look at a resume and say, there's 125 data points here, or there's 150, or there's 300 data points that tell us where people have worked, how long for, what skills have they got, where were they educated, where did they go to school, who are their friends, who are their references, what organisations were they with, how often did they... There's so many questions that if I took the 1.5 million resumes from SmartRecruiters and used them and said, let's say we just said there's 100 data points that we want to find out about, and you could give me the answer probably how many there is, but even if we said there was 100 data points and then we multiplied that by 1.5 million, that story can say, in this area, here's the people, here's the skills, here's the locations, here's the education, this is their average age, this is who their friends are, this is all of that information just from the resumes that we own, looked at through a different lens. It changes the possibility.
And it's a bit, so all of this sounds to a technologist sounds extremely exciting. Like, what can I do with this, right? But it's funny how many companies I talk to that everyone wants to have their cake and eat it too. They sit there and they say, okay, I want to take advantage of these data sets. I want to learn, but I don't want you to learn from me, because what I'm doing is special and what I'm doing needs to be protected. I don't want to, God forbid you actually have a situation where one of my competitors gets past one of my rejected candidates that I didn't even want. This is a very sensitive topic for them, because they still perceive this as a candidate as being owned just data. Them.
Yeah.
But the candidate is not, it is, their application is owned by you. They are their own person with many applications in the world.
Right.
And I think sometimes companies fail to recognize that. Yeah. And therefore they block themselves from potentially taking advantage of some pretty interesting insight and technology that we can produce.
So it's also how they think. So historically, I used to run recruitment and sales companies years ago. That's where I started out. And historically, if you gave me some data, we didn't call it data in those days, we called it a CV, or a job description, whatever. If you gave me that information, that was proprietary to me, unless I or you chose to give it the same information to somebody else. But it was on quite a small scale. Maybe 3 or 4 people would have that information, at most. So the ownership and value used to be in the data that I have that you don't, because it was private. And before we had computers, I used to put them in filing cabinets. Then what we did is, when we built computers, we just built them as big filing cabinets. And said, put all the information in, never look at it, don't do anything with it, just put it in there. And we built it became much more about data storage than data retrieval or using it in a different way. So that attitude still prevails of, but this is my data. We're like, but it's not your data. It's
a
their
LinkedIn
data.
profile that everybody can see.
That everyone can see. There's nothing secret about LinkedIn.
So wait, but we're going to hold
the advantage is
how
how you
hold there
use it.
because I want to change our conversation to the GDPR because we only have a few more minutes and we have a bit of time left. But for the folks who are listening, I think this is a great segue because you're talking about the ownership of the data. The GDPR is in effect on May 25th, and it's the General Data Protection Regulations out of Europe, which is the EU.
Well, this is very important for most of your US listeners. It's European data subjects, not out of Europe. So if someone were to apply for a job...
Wait, let's first talk what it is.
Can I just tell one thing that's really important?
Okay.
If someone were to apply for a job in the US, on a US website, and were to do that whilst they were in Paris, on vacation, they would be a European data subject. Subject to GDPR.
Yeah. That's the part that's kind of scary.
And is oftentimes forgotten by a lot of U.S. companies that choose to take that risk because they don't quite understand that one point, which is that you are just as exposed as a country or a company based out of or headquartered in Europe.
And the other fundamental thing that I think is really important for your US listeners is 2 points which have been made recently. One is that there is law trying to be pushed through the House and the Senate at the moment, which would mirror GDPR just in the US. And this is the result of the Facebook and Cambridge Analytica and all the panic. Suddenly everyone's going, hey...
Is there a bill in the House?
Yes. Well, they're pushing it through the House to effectively adopt GDPR as a US standard. Now, I'm sure there'll be some defeats and changes to that, but the point is there is some data regulation coming.
Really? I didn't know that was happening.
The second thing is Facebook are choosing, or saying they're choosing, to adopt GDPR as the global Facebook standard for Facebook data. So if you use any Facebook data, and we can assume that if Facebook do that, then other social media channels like LinkedIn and others will adopt the same thing. And to a degree, they want to do that because it makes their data private again.
So let's talk about what it is, because people listening, they're getting the
they
part
say,
of the story.
this is great, but we have no idea.
This is covering the 3 classes of people. They're the people who hold the data, the people who collect the data, and the person who gave the data. And ostensibly, it's like I own my data, right? If I give you my data, whatever it is.
You are the data owner as the candidate.
I own it, and you can't do whatever you want with it. And if
you can only do what you tell us you're going to do with it.
Yes.
Yeah, and I have to opt in if you're going to communicate with me. So if I apply for a job.
Not necessarily.
Well, if I apply for a job and I don't get that job, you can't contact me about another job.
Yes, I can.
So it depends on your read of consent. So there's A through F. We were actually just talking about this before. Different ways in which you can collect data.
Right.
And one argument that Bill was arguing for was around 6.1F, which is legitimate interest. So I'm collecting your data because I have a legitimate interest in having this for you and for me, and I will keep it as long as I maintain that same level of interest. A lot of companies like SmartRecruiters, because they don't necessarily know they're interacting with a SmartRecruiters platform when they're applying to a job, we have to adopt 6.1A, which is explicit consent. We need to actually ask them.
They have to tell you it's called for SmartRecruiters to have
SmartRecruiters to process the data. But if I'm a company, a big enterprise based out of France, I might also opt for 6.1B, which is another one that says basically that I have the intent of entering into a contract with you. And every applicant is hoping to get a job, which is a contract with that company. And therefore, I don't need to consent because the intent of this action is actually to be contracted.
And I'm not going to, and there's lots of things around it, like I'm never going to give this data information for anyone else.
Sure.
I'm only going to use it, I have to be very explicit about purpose to say I'm only going to use it for this.
And it can be deleted.
Right. So, and where I think the interesting bit for us, it may not be for listeners, but the geeky bit in the GDPR is when you're talking about the point of SmartRecruiters' role, which is in passing on that data to another party. There may be no legitimate business interest in SmartRecruiters retaining that data, but in transferring it to my ATS as an employer, when that data becomes my data, there's a legitimate business interest in me keeping it for 2 years. A SmartRecruiters may legitimately be saying, we cannot keep it for longer than a week, at which point we should have passed it to you. And when you have it, you're applying your own data regulations as an employer. So we have lots of complexity that says we're both actually right in our answer.
Yes.
We're both correct in our answer. What's important is we've done a legitimate business interest study of that, which covers things like timescale. So I would say I can hold that data.
What do you mean by timescale?
So I'm applying at the moment, in most cases, legitimate business interest of 2 years. So if you give me a resume, I can keep it for 2 years, but that 2 years re-triggers every time we interact. So every time you respond to me, I take that as a consent, and I'm not asking for explicit consent. But I'm telling you, now there's a difference between you applying to me and providing me with a resume and doing that, and me deciding I want to source you and collecting your
and
data.
And add you to the system.
If I add you by my choice, because I see Lorne's LinkedIn profile and I think he looks like a cool guy, so I want to put, or I refer you, I want to put you in, my time scale is 2 weeks to respond to the thing that I've added you.
Yeah, you would need to consent then, because he is actually taking an action on your behalf. So
I'm doing it on your behalf, and you've never said, but if you, whereas had you sent me a resume, different.
It's going to be complicated.
Well, it's actually...
I think it's really simple.
It makes
No, I
a
think it's
lot
going to be
of
complicated
sense.
because what you're saying is, like I read it and I thought I understood it. Now I don't understand
I think
it.
most people did that.
But I will say the one thing that's been interesting, a couple weeks back, SmartRecruiters released our GDPR set. So we did all the features in support of it for global companies and ourselves, frankly. The amount of backlash that came from our US customers who were very upset about the fact that candidates could delete themselves. They said, well, if they delete themselves, we don't want them to do that without our permission. We have to keep this data. This is very important to us. Why would you ever introduce a feature that we couldn't turn off? Our perspective is kind of going back to what Bill's saying. SmartRecruiters needs to actually comply because we do international business, and we have no idea if somebody sitting in Europe is to apply to another job. There's no way for us to know one way or another, because to Bill's example, you could be on vacation in Paris, you could live in San Francisco, you submit an application saying you live in San Francisco, but you were in Paris. We wouldn't know that.
So let me ask a question. Do the ATSs know where the resume came from?
So we know we can detect.
Because this doesn't apply to U.S. resumes.
We can detect where people are when they apply,
right,
for
by the
sure.
EP.
That's simple.
Yeah.
That's location.
Right.
Right.
So in other words, if I'm in U.S., I apply to a U.S. company, none of this applies.
Right. But if I, for now,
wrote to you about a European job.
Yes.
So
Sorry?
you apply for a U.S. Office of a US, let's say a company like Raytheon, someone like that. You apply for Raytheon and say, I want to work for Raytheon, and here's my CV, and you've applied for a US job, and I'm going, well, I don't have to worry about that data. But in that process, I match you against a job in Paris, and I notify you about that job in Paris, and I'm now providing you data from Paris for that job, and you would be applying for that job in Paris.
Different people are seeing your information.
You would become a European data subject.
Yeah.
Right.
So I have no idea when you give me that data that you won't ever become a European data subject. So I have certain fundamentals about this when I look at it is, as an employer or an operator, it's a lot of admin at the moment. As a data subject, if I'm looking at it as a data owner and saying, because this isn't about recruiting. This wasn't designed to destroy sourcing or make recruiting hard. This is for everything. Every aspect of e-commerce and life and data. So as a data subject...
Yeah, I didn't know that either.
Right.
Because the only place I heard GDPR coming out of
course,
SmartRecruiters
is where it directly relates to.
Yeah.
Sales and marketing. So
But it's everything.
It's going
It's
to
everything.
make a significant difference to the communication that comes to me, how my data is used. Right now, I go to a comparison website for insurance, and in that, they ask me a question, say, have you ever had an accident? And I say, yeah, I had an accident 3 years ago. And I then get 30 phone calls because they've got my phone number, and they sell my data to a company who rings me up and says, what about a compensation claim and all that kind of stuff. So there's so many aspects which I'm saying, hey, this is going to make my life. If I look on it as a data subject, I don't want my data being sold to people I don't know. I don't want it being algorithmically processed when I don't know you're doing it and what that process is. So I think when we've got over the hump, we will take it as a great thing.
Next year, we're going to talk about this
Oh, yeah.
and have a see where we're at. I'd be really curious to see.
And the point is, like any legislation, right? We could have an argument now around the table about what's a reasonable period of time, because the Act says reasonable period of time. Now, I could say, in my legitimate business, that's why I'm saying in my legitimate business interest, that's 2 years. And you're saying
I
in
could
my
say 6
legitimate
months.
business interest, or a week.
Yeah.
Because I'm passing it.
Rebecca, do you have any closing thoughts before we?
No, I would actually love to revisit this, though, after the law actually takes effect, because it will be interesting. I do believe that the two areas where you'll see a lot of bubble up is in recruiting and also in marketing communications and things like what Bill described.
Yeah.
And there will be somebody that will be made an example of, I am sure. I obviously released a lot of features so that it wouldn't be me. But I would say
Every type of company will be made an example.
But as a good example, Austria just basically announced that they won't be fining people, which is
Because
interesting.
they're not in the European Union. But they're in Europe.
And a lot of other countries starting to have these conversations. So I wonder what will come of it.
Just so you know, Britain is not going to be in the European Union either. Right? But our stance is that we'll be adopting the same data laws. But actually, GDPR won't apply in the UK.
But isn't it every country has their own bit of?
They have their own add-on. They have their own add-on. And that's the coolest feature of SmartRecruiters is the most boring one, unless you're an operator, which is the compliance feature.
Yeah.
The compliance feature that makes you compliant in the country you're in. And when I was shown that by Jerome, I made him show it to me 3 times because I was like, really? And everyone else who were analysts in the room didn't even notice it. And I'm like, whoa, can we like go back? Can we just, and I'm not a data guy, but I was like, so you can be compliant in every country? Yeah, right, okay, that's cool.
So on that note, how can folks reach you, Bill?
Google me, Facebook. Just don't phone me or don't send me an email because I don't.
Or call you.
Yeah, Facebook.
Facebook.
Please don't call me. I don't like speaking to people.
Awesome. And Rebecca, how can folks find you?
LinkedIn or Facebook is best for me.
Cool.
Yeah, shoot me a message.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being
Thanks,
here. It's a
everybody.
great conversation.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Lorne Epstein Show. I'm your host, Lorne Epstein, here on 96.7 FM, Arlington, Virginia. And we'll see you next week here on